Hey everyone, welcome to the first ever race review from CCF1.
We just finished watching the Austrian Grand Prix today. Oh my god, what a race. We're going to get into that. So the way that this is going to work is we are going to score everything based on the level of excitement, the drama that took place throughout the race, and then the actual racing itself. Our goal at the end of this is to have a comprehensive number to assign to the race out of the scorecard. And then at the end of the season, we'll be able to judge accordingly and see which race came out on top.
And which ones were at the bottom. Because let's face it, there'll be some out there. For those of you who don't know us, my name is Chris. This is Cassidy. We're both racing fans based out of Montreal, Canada. We're going to just jump right into it. And Cass, do you mind just recapping us on what happened in the first part of the race?
Before the race even started, this was dramatic. Okay, right out of the gate. Red Bull filing for a formal protest. Hamilton gets the penalty before it even starts. There's a grid placement. It's already chaos. In all honesty, when the race started, I was expecting total carnage. I was expecting a crash into turn one. I was expecting some serious overtakes. I was expecting it not to be a clean getaway, but it kind of was.
I mean, yeah, looking at it, Bottas got away with like already a 2-second lead. After the first lap, I think it was.
Yeah, like the opening laps didn't have that much to them. You had Charles that was kind of going a little bit over track limits. McLaren kind of disappointed me at first, how they started falling back. I was really thinking that, okay, they showed some sort of pace in qualifying that they don't have in the race.
So you have Max, who's won the past 2 races at Austria. So you have high hopes he's going to get that hat trick, but once we got to lap 9, he already started experiencing problems. Started dropping off the list because he had an anti-stall issue.
And then to my heartbreak, less than, 5 or so laps later, Ricciardo has a problem.
Get another shot of just another F1 car going slow.
Like, for God's sakes. And it's sad to say, but Ricciardo, an engine failure. It's a sight we've seen all too often. Heavily disappointed because he looked amazing in free practice. He looked amazing in qualifying despite being led up by the yellow flags. And then just for all of that to get taken away by, I think it was, from what I have here, it was lap 19. And then 2 laps later, the same thing happens to Stroll. 3 DNFs, all within the span of roughly 10 laps of each other.
So after those 3 incidences, we had our first crash of the race where you have Ocon trying to make a passing move into turn 3 and Magnussen both going wheel to wheel, and then somehow Magnussen's brakes don't work and he just continues going straight and has to do sort of like a 180 to get himself to stop, and that's what kicks off our first safety car.
And of course, we know whenever there's a safety car, people rush into the pits. And boy, did they rush.
Oh, yes.
First, you get the double stack from Mercedes. And do we ever see Mercedes mess up? Yes, occasionally. Germany 2019. But in this case, no hesitation. They did a double stack, 2.8 seconds and 2.5 seconds. Really could not have gone any better. I thought that was going to be it, but then no. Then Norris has issues getting out of the pits. One of his tires was slow to put on. He exits, and then Checo almost just swerves into him. It honestly wasn't as close as the first angle made it look. He did kind of keep more off to the side, but I thought it was an unsafe release.
So there's a lot of anticipation building up now that all the racers are back within neck and neck of each other. And we're just excited to see some sort of Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas fight. Not the case. Valtteri gets a great, excellent start. So we move further down the lineup next, and we get to the 2 McLarens and the Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel.
Vettel had the inside line. You got Carlos on the outside. And the gap is getting narrower.
And you see the tires getting closer, and then you see a car spin, and you ask, who might that be?
Spin Bastian Vettel!
So I did feel bad when he spun, but it was also just kind of ironic because you tend to see him spin from time to time.
Me too, especially because I was waiting for the comments and they came immediately. He gets spun by the person replacing him next year. I was like, oh god, here we go.
The symbolism.
And then lap 33, we saw a great overtake by Perez over Norris. My little McLaren loving heart got a little bit sad, but it was a fantastic move. Then kind of for the midpoint of the race, like between laps 30 and 40, not much happened. And then Lap 44, we get the comment from Mercedes. They got sensor issues. Stay off the curbs. They're not staying off the curbs.
No. And then the funny thing is, I think they even said, like, Valtteri, your car's in worse shape. I guess we'll just wait it out and see if anyone spins out or any other crashes happen. And boy, were we unaware of what was to come.
So getting into that, because of all these mechanical failures and the grid getting smaller and smaller and smaller, I was really getting excited because at one point, George was up into 12th place. Even on Sky Sports, they mentioned if there's just a couple more mistakes or a couple more failures, Williams could find themselves in the points. And it was really looking like a possibility. And then lap 51 came around and his car just died on him.
We were on commercial break during that point. We saw the Williams and I'm like, not George.
But then comparatively, to no real surprise, Grosjean spun out again. I think within a couple of laps later, very shortly after George, he also was out of the race.
And this brought out our second safety car of the race, which is another shake-up moment, which brings my excitement level back up for the second half. You have most of the teams going in for their pits again, some opting out for the mediums.
Then Albon comes into the pits, he puts on the softs. We're expecting something exciting with him chasing down the Mercedes now, especially because they're on old tires. They didn't come into pit because their sensors are so sensitive.
Albon started making his move on Perez, and it looks like he got past him, but then by that point the safety car came back out because Kimi Räikkönen lost his wheel.
Just lost a whole tire. Tire said bye. It said, I'm on vacation. I don't want to do this no more.
And then, so yeah, he then had to pull over on the grid. So this made an even longer safety car. So they lost more laps than the last time. Now Albon was ahead of Perez. And now he's about to make his soft tire attack on Lewis Hamilton. And boy, did that happen. The wrong way.
Did they learn nothing from Brazil?
Well, they switched spots.
I was so mad. I was so mad.
Albon got spun again, pretty much ruining his chances for a podium, and he had the pace and the tires clearly from each time the safety car went in. He was clearly faster than everyone else, but he got spun. Hamilton just carried on. It ended up giving him a 5-second penalty in the end, which was our next sort of like area where someone new could be on the podium.
And then Charles Leclerc, who has been absent from this entire race. Charles was consistently moving himself up the grid throughout the race, but he was just so quiet about it that I genuinely completely forgot about him until he made the overtake on Norris. In any other circumstance, I would have been thrilled to see him on the podium, but I thought in that moment he was taking it away from Norris. So I was so mad. But lap 64, Leclerc overtakes Norris. One lap later, lap 65, Leclerc overtakes Perez. And I'm like, can we please just have at least one different person on the podium? And then while Leclerc is doing all of these overtakes, we didn't know that Hamilton was getting handed a 5-second time penalty. So we're thinking, oh God, it's going to be a Mercedes 1-2 with a Ferrari on the podium. Same old story. And then the 5-second penalty happens. And while all of this is going on, there's a battle between the two McLarens. And I'm like, guys, focus. There is a podium position on the line here, okay?
Yeah. So now you have this invisible race that we're now calculating, seeing like who is in contention of this 5-second rule, when will he be off the podium, and then you got the commentators telling us, oh, they might let Lewis by just so that he can build off his lead.
And then seemingly out of nowhere, Perez gets handed a 5-second time penalty for speeding in the pits like 40 laps ago.
Yeah, they never even told us it was under investigation.
And then within the same lap, poor Albon retires from the race, yet another addition to the DNF list.
Not helping out Red Bull at all with their championship on both constructors and drivers.
Yeah. And then, you know, we're on the final laps of the race, and then Kvyat's tire explodes. Yeah. Also gives up. Just says, you know what? I'm gonna join Kimi's tire. I'm over this. With one lap left in the race.
It's just kind of ironic because you're just like, oh, this race is going on. You're still trying to see, like, is Hamilton going to make it on the podium or not? And the next thing you know, they cut away. Oh, Kvyat's tire blew. And then you're like, there goes the 9th driver in this race. Like, what the heck is happening?
And literally up until the final few corners, the commentators were still going off saying, are they going to switch Lewis and Bottas to keep the 5-second gap? I didn't know what the hell was going on. The commentators were saying one thing, and then Valtteri was rounding the final corner. And I'm like, well, you're running out of road. Valtteri wins. Well-deserved.
You see the 2 Mercedes go by. And as we're approaching this, you can see the gap between Hamilton and Norris. It's at 5.1, I think, before that metric just disappears off the screen. And I'm like, is he going to do it? Next thing you know, the fastest lap goes to Lando Norris. And you're like, was that enough? And then it popped up that it was 4.7?
4.8.
4.8 seconds difference. And we got up cheering.
Yeah, for him to get his first podium under such weird circumstances was a really cool thing to see.
You have Ferrari that just somehow snuck up into 2nd place, and now it looks like, oh yeah, Ferrari's just still the same Ferrari, kind of.
Yeah, it was so weird to see one on the podium when they've basically been absent this entire week.
The podium celebration, definitely unique. I'm happy to see that they could at least do some champagne. That's always a fun part, especially if it's your first time being on the F1 podium. It's one of these races where I was just like kind of thrown off and like confused at where F1 was because it was so chaotic.
Yeah, kind of conflicting because on one hand, I want every race to be this exciting, but I also understand the point of we were treated to such a wonderful season opener, and we're going back to the same track next week. If it's not as dramatic, are we going to be let down, even though next week's race could be fantastic in terms of overtaking, in terms of strategy? I also would have been interested to see how the race would have played out if Hamilton never got his starting grid penalty. Maybe he would have had a fantastic start, could have pulled off an overtake, and it could have been a very different race.
Yeah, it does build up some expectations of what's to happen next week, and you can definitely find out if it's going to be better or worse than this week by tuning into our next video. But now it's time to go into the scorecards. We have rated the first and second halves of this race based on how excited or how shocked and stressed we were while watching, the quality of racing, were there good overtakes, was there any overtakes, and then also just the drama and unexpected events that took place. And once again, we're going to put all of these scores up against each other at the end of the season to see which race is going to be the best and which one's going to be the most, I guess, boring. For the Austrian Grand Prix, Week 1, 2020, Cass, what do you got on your scorecard for the first half?
For the first half, overall, I rounded it to a 7. Some viewers may agree or disagree with. My reasoning is, in terms of excitement, I still found it exciting with, yes, you had the mechanical failures, you had the drama in the pits, we had, some stuff going on. And I would say in comparison to, how things could have been if we didn't have that, it would have been a much less exciting race, because that builds into my second point, where the racing itself was a bit of a low for me. I rated it a 5 because overall, strategy was just not a huge factor in this race. We didn't see that many overtakes in the first half. Maybe some of it wasn't shown on TV. I feel like the first half of the race was very much focused on the front runners. I just wasn't thoroughly entertained by the level of racing itself. But drama, I put at an 8. Because with all of the failures, with stuff going on in the pits, with the double stack, with all the just general confusion over why things were failing, and Racing Point had smoke coming out of their cars and no one knew why, and some people are saying, oh, it's been happening all weekend, and the other people are like, that looks bad. To me, that was dramatic. So when you put all of those together, gives you a 7.
Yeah, more on my side. I gave it a 6.5. Probably the only thing I dropped lower was mostly for the racing. I didn't see that many overtakes, and if there was, it was either just a boring overtake or like one we expected to happen. A few more than usual DNFs at this point, but yeah, that's only why it's scoring a 6.5.
Moving on to the second half of the race, however, excitement level for me personally, that was a 10. I got up from my chair. I was screaming. I was jumping. My adrenaline levels were through the roof. I genuinely have not been that excited about a race since Germany 2019. Brazil was exciting. I found this more exciting. I had more oh my god moments than that. So that's why I honestly give this a perfect score for the second half of the race. I gave the racing a 6.5, which is still like a little low, but honestly not that much happened. Another reason I gave it slightly higher than the first half is because we did have that battle between the McLarens that had me on edge and terrified. But in comparison to some more strategic, tricky circuits, I found this was kind of low. And then, of course, I'm sorry, but for drama, how could I not give it a 10? Almost half of the field was out by the end of the race. And between the confusion over the sensor issues at Mercedes and then randomly tires exploding and falling off and all of the DNFs and the time penalties and who's going to be on the podium. Can they pull it off? Just wild. Overall, it gives you a 9. Boom.
Yeah, so for my second half, definitely I meet you at the same level of excitement. We were in the same room, of course. I was getting up, we were shouting. And then it was also down to the wire. It was one of those races where it came down to the last moment where it's like almost like a hockey game when they score an overtime goal.
How Canadian of you.
And so that's why I give the excitement a 10. In terms of the racing, same points, didn't really see it, but I mean, I got more of it than the first half because of the safety cars. And then on the drama, it's just left, right, and center, a new piece of information was coming out as if it was almost like they were just trying to make this even more crazier than it was, you know? We're just taking in so much information all at once, so it was a lot, so I scored that a 9.5.
So overall, when we combine our scores,
you get 6.5. Plus a 9.5, I would score this about an 8.
Yeah, mine was a 7 and then a 9, so that also makes it an 8. I would say a strong 8. I'm sure that there's a lot of people who would watch this and say, what are you talking about? This is one of the best races we've had in recent years. I agree with you, but the level of actual wheel-to-wheel racing
yeah.
was what was lacking for me. Other than that, it had everything else.
So that would score this race from the CCF1 channel on the leaderboard as an 8. It's a high bar to start with. I'm excited to see if any of the other races to come in this season will surpass it, or which ones will be the complete opposite. You can find out more by subscribing to this YouTube channel.
For next week's race and everything after that, make sure to follow us on our social medias at CCF1 channel. I do all of the live tweeting during the race.
Yeah, and you can find us here next week for the next race and every other race to come with another race review.
Thanks for tuning in. Please do it again.